The town of Maple Creek, Ohio, was the kind of place where most people knew one another by name. It was quiet, predictable, and safe, exactly the sort of town where nothing ever made national news. On that Saturday morning, the town square looked especially alive. Colorful banners hung from streetlights, folding chairs lined the sidewalks, and a police cruiser was parked near the center fountain, its lights flashing softly, not as a warning but as part of a celebration. The Maple Creek Police Department was hosting its annual Community Safety Day, an event meant to bring officers and civilians closer together. Families arrived early, pushing strollers, carrying diaper bags, and holding cups of coffee. Children darted between booths offering stickers, plastic badges, and balloons shaped like animals. Laughter floated through the air, mixing with the smell of popcorn and hot dogs. For the officers, it was a rare day without emergencies. No sirens, no rush, just smiles, handshakes, and answering questions from curious kids who wanted to know how fast police cars could go or whether officers ever got scared. At the far end of the square stood the main attraction, the K9 demonstration area. A tall officer in a dark blue uniform stood beside a large German shepherd, his hand resting calmly on the dog's leash. The dog sat perfectly still, muscles tight but controlled, ears alert, eyes sharp and observant. This was K9 Rex, one of the most respected police dogs in the county. He had assisted in drug seizures, tracked missing persons, and helped apprehend dangerous suspects. Among officers, Rex had a reputation, disciplined, fearless, and intensely focused. Children stared at him from behind the safety barrier. Some whispered nervously, others clung to their parents' legs. About 20 feet away, standing slightly behind the crowd, was a small boy named Eli. At just 3 years old, Eli was quiet in a way that often surprised adults. He wasn't shy, exactly, just observant. While other children ran around chasing balloons, Eli stood still, his tiny fingers wrapped around his mother's hand. His brown hair curled softly around his ears, and his sneakers were still new enough to squeak faintly against the pavement. But Eli wasn't watching the balloons. He wasn't watching the police cars. He wasn't watching the crowd. His eyes were locked on the dog. From the moment they arrived, something about Rex had captured Eli's attention. He didn't see the badge, the uniform, or the leash. He saw the dog's eyes, steady, intelligent, and strangely calm. While others saw strength and authority, Eli felt something else, a quiet pull, a sense of familiarity he couldn't explain. His mother, Sarah, noticed his stillness and smiled softly. She assumed he was simply fascinated like most children. After all, Rex was impressive, tall, powerful, and serious. Sarah adjusted her grip on Eli's hand and leaned down. "Do you like the dog?" she asked gently. Eli didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. His small chest rose and fell slowly as he watched Rex, almost as if he were studying him. The noise of the crowd faded into the background for him. The world narrowed to just one thing: the dog. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Hayes, Rex's handler, addressed the crowd through a microphone. He spoke about the importance of K9 units, about trust, training, and teamwork. He explained how Rex was trained to remain calm around crowds and children, how distractions didn't affect him, and how every move the dog made was intentional. As if on cue, Rex remained motionless. Children clapped when Officer Hayes demonstrated simple commands. Rex responded instantly, sitting, standing, turning, each movement precise. The crowd murmured in admiration. "Wow," someone whispered. "That dog is incredible," another parent said. Eli's grip on his mother's hand tightened. Something stirred inside him, an emotion too big for words. It wasn't excitement, it wasn't fear. It was something quieter, deeper, almost like recognition. Rex's gaze briefly shifted. Among the sea of faces, among the colors and movement, his eyes met Eli. It was only for a second. But in that second, the dog's focus lingered. Officer Hayes didn't notice, the crowd didn't notice, but Rex did. The dog's ears flicked slightly. His breathing changed just enough to be different. He didn't move. A training kept him still, but something inside him registered the child's presence. Eli felt it. His eyes widened, not in alarm but in certainty. The demonstration continued, but Eli barely heard a word. His mind, simple and pure, followed an instinct adults often lost long ago. He felt no danger, only curiosity and warmth. Sarah glanced down again. "Eli," she said softly, "do you want to see the balloons?" Still no response. Instead, Eli took a small step forward. Sarah noticed immediately and tightened her grip. "Hey, buddy, stay right here." Eli stopped, but his eyes never left Rex. Officer Hayes finished explaining how important it was for people, especially children, to keep a safe distance from working dogs. Several parents nodded in agreement. Rex sat tall and composed, the image of control. But the moment his eyes drifted again, they found Eli still, quiet and watching with unwavering focus. The air between them felt different, charged, as if something unseen was forming. Sarah felt a strange unease she couldn't explain. Not fear, just the sense that something was about to happen. She adjusted Eli's jacket and tried to redirect him. "Come on, sweetheart," she said. "Let's go closer to the front." Eli didn't resist, but he didn't follow either. He stood there small and silent, facing a dog trained for danger. The crowd laughed at a joke Officer Hayes made. Someone clapped. A balloon popped somewhere behind them. And in the middle of all that noise, something invisible began to unfold. A moment no one planned. A moment no one expected. A moment that would leave police officers, parents, and an entire nation speechless. And it was only just beginning. Before Rex ever wore a police vest, before he stood proudly beside Officer Daniel Hayes, his life had followed a very different path. Rex was born on a working dog breeding farm in rural Indiana, one of 6 strong, healthy German Shepherd puppies. From the beginning, trainers noticed something unusual about him. While his litter mates wrestled and barked endlessly, Rex observed. He watched. He listened. His reactions were slower but deliberate. When he moved, it was with purpose. By 6 months old, he had already begun formal training. Loud noises, flashing lights, strangers, obstacles, nothing rattled him. Trainers praised his discipline, his intelligence, and his ability to remain focused under pressure. He learned commands faster than most dogs twice his age. Yet there was another side to Rex that rarely appeared in training reports. Empathy. Rex noticed when a trainer was frustrated. He noticed when someone was tired. On more than one occasion, he quietly rested his head against a knee or leaned into a hand when no command was given. It wasn't taught. It wasn't rewarded. It simply existed. When Officer Hayes first met Rex, the bond was immediate. Daniel Hayes had been with the Maple Creek Police Department for 12 years. He had seen enough tragedy to last a lifetime. When he volunteered to become a K-9 handler, he didn't expect the partnership to change him as much as it did. Rex wasn't just a tool, he was a partner, a protector, a presence that made dangerous nights safer. Together, they responded to missing person cases in freezing rain. Rex had tracked a lost elderly man through dense woods and located him just in time. He had sniffed out narcotics during traffic stops and stood firm during arrests that could have turned violent. Rex never hesitated, never panicked, never broke formation. Until today. Back in the town square, Officer Hayes adjusted the microphone and glanced down at Rex. Everything appeared normal. The dog sat perfectly still, eyes forward, posture textbook. But beneath the calm exterior, Rex was aware. He felt the crowd the way only a working dog could, not as faces but as energy, noise, movement, emotion. He filtered it all out automatically, focusing only on threats and commands. Then there was the child. Rex didn't understand why the child stood out, Children were usually chaotic, running, shouting, pointing. This one was still, focused, quiet. And watching him. Rex's instincts told him there was no danger, no fear sent, no tension, just calm curiosity. Something about that steadiness cut through years of conditioning. Officer Hayes began explaining Rex's bite-and-release training, gesturing toward a padded volunteer. The crowd leaned in, fascinated. Eli's mother felt a growing tension she couldn't name. Her son's silence wasn't unusual, but the intensity of his gaze was. She crouched beside him. "Eli," she whispered, "you okay?" He nodded slowly. "Why are you looking at the dog like that?" Eli thought for a moment, searching for words his 3-year-old mind barely knew. "He looks lonely," he said quietly. Sarah blinked, "Lonely?" Eli nodded again. "He's working." The words hit her harder than she expected. Before she could respond, the demonstration paused briefly. Officer Hayes raised a hand, signaling for the crowd to stay behind the barrier while he repositioned. That's when Eli felt it. Not a thought, not a decision. A pull. His hand slipped free from his mother. Sarah felt it instantly, Eli. But the moment passed too quickly. Eli stepped forward. At first it was just one step, then another, small legs moving with surprising certainty. The crowd reacted immediately. A woman gasped. Someone shouted, "Hey!" An officer shifted position. Officer Hayes's hand tightened on the leash. Rex sensed the change before anyone else did. He felt the sudden spike in adrenaline from the humans around him. He heard the shift in voices. He smelled tension. His training kicked in instantly, alert, ready, controlled. But the child kept walking. Slow, calm, unafraid. Rex locked eyes with Eli again. Up close the child smelled like soap and sunshine. No fear, no aggression, just warmth. Rex's ears twitched slightly, a tiny movement no one noticed except the handler. Officer Hayes's heart raced. He had trained for this, unexpected movements, sudden threats, but never a toddler breaking protocol. Every instinct told him to pull Rex back, to step between the dog and the child. Yet something stopped him. Rex wasn't reacting. No growl. No stiffening. No warning signs. The dog's body language wasn't defensive, it was curious. Officer Hayes raised a hand toward the nearest officer, signaling them to wait. "Easy," he murmured under his breath. Eli stopped just a few feet away. The barrier rope lay behind him now. There was nothing between him and the dog except air and silence. Time stretched. Sarah covered her mouth, frozen in place. Every protective instinct screamed at her to run forward, but fear rooted her feet. She had never seen her son so calm, so certain. Eli looked up at Rex. The dog was enormous from this close, taller than Eli's chest, strong, powerful, yet Eli felt no fear, only respect. He noticed Rex's vest, the badge, the leash. "He has a job," Eli whispered. Rex tilted his head almost imperceptibly. Officer Hayes held his breath. The crowd was completely silent now. No phones, no whispers, just the sound of a flag flapping somewhere above them. Eli raised his hand slightly, stopping halfway, unsure. Rex didn't move. The air between them felt heavy, charged with something no one could explain. This was the moment where everything could go wrong. Or everything could change. And Rex, trained for danger, discipline, and duty, made a choice no one expected. But that choice had not yet revealed itself. Because first, the child would do something that no training manual, no officer, and no parent could have predicted. And when he did, it would shake everyone watching to their core. The morning sun beat softly over the Maple Creek town square, but the atmosphere had changed. What had begun as an ordinary community demonstration now carried an unspoken electricity. Parents whispered nervously to one another. Children stopped mid-laugh, sensing the unusual intensity of the moment. Even the balloons seemed to sway with more caution, as though nature itself had noticed that something extraordinary was unfolding. Eli, barely 3 years old, had taken one small step forward, freeing his hand from his mother's gentle grip. Then another. Each step was deliberate, measured, as though he understood the importance of what he was about to do. The crowd instinctively moved back, creating a small circle around him. Every adult watching instinctively registered the risk. A toddler approaching a fully trained police dog was not supposed to happen, and yet here it was, happening in slow motion. Sarah's heart raced. She wanted to scream, to run, to scoop him up, but she could only freeze, her eyes wide and her hands trembling. She had raised her son to be careful, to obey, and yet he ignored everything she had ever taught him. There was a strange calm about him, one that clashed violently with her rising panic. Officer Hayes's grip on Rex's leash was firm, trained, instinctual. His other hand hovered near the dog's harness, ready to intervene if necessary. He had trained for hundreds of scenarios, unruly crowds, aggressive suspects, sudden attacks, but he had never trained for this. A small, fearless child walking directly into Rex's space with no fear at all. Every muscle in his body tensed, yet he hesitated. Something in Rex's behavior gave him pause. The dog, still seated, watched the child's movements closely. His eyes, sharp and disciplined, flickered between the toddler and the crowd. There was no growl, no stiffening, no sign of aggression, only focused observation. It was as if Rex recognized something fundamental in the child, something humans could not immediately perceive. The crowd was completely silent now. The usual chatter, laughter, and occasional squeal of children were replaced by a tense quiet. People held their breath collectively, the moment stretching as seconds became eternities. Eli took another step and then another until he was just a few feet from Rex. The dog's enormous frame loomed above him, muscles taut, jaws strong and capable. A trained adult would have hesitated, but Eli did not. His small chest rose and fell steadily. His tiny fingers curled into a fist. He looked up, meeting Rex's gaze with unwavering curiosity. There was no fear, only recognition, a silent understanding that passed between them faster than words ever could. "Stay calm, Rex," Officer Hayes murmured under his breath, even though he knew the dog didn't need reassurance. It was instinct more than training that guided Rex now. His body remained relaxed but alert, the perfect combination that told Hayes something incredible was about to happen. Eli's mother, Sarah, could hardly process what she was seeing. Her son, a boy of just 3 years, stood before one of the most disciplined police dogs in the state, unafraid. The thought of what could happen, scratches, bites, a sudden lunge, flashed through her mind. But she noticed something else, a subtle shift in Rex. The dog's ears tilted slightly back, his tail lowered, his gaze softened, not submissive but attentive in a way that humans often described as empathy. Sarah's panic mixed with awe. She had seen working dogs. She had seen well-trained K9s, but never anything like this. Eli raised his tiny hand slowly, uncertain at first, then with quiet confidence. He placed it over his small heart and whispered almost to himself, "Good dog." The words were simple, a childlike observation that seemed trivial to adults, but in that moment they carried weight. The phrase resonated in the air between the child and the dog, unseen by the crowd but profoundly felt. Rex's head tilted, and the tiniest movement of his jaw suggested recognition. He shifted his weight slightly forward but did not rise, did not lunge, did not move in a threatening manner. Every officer in the square, veterans who had handled dangerous situations, felt their stomachs tighten. Something miraculous was happening in front of them. A trained, disciplined, powerful K9 had responded not to a command, not to a treat, but to a simple gesture of a child. The crowd's silence became almost reverential. Phones were raised hesitantly, but people whispered that they dared not record too quickly, afraid that the magic would break. A woman clutched her child to her chest. A man behind her leaned forward, mouth slightly open. No one wanted to blink for fear of missing the unfolding moment. Eli took one more step closer, and this time he extended both hands, palms open in the universal gesture of peace. "It's okay," he whispered softly. "You're a good dog." The words were simple, pure, and untainted by fear or caution. In that moment, all of the dog's rigorous training, the bite-and-hold drills, the alert commands, the hours of obedience, faded into the background. What remained was something deeper, something primal: recognition, understanding, trust. Rex's response was subtle but unmistakable. He lowered his massive head slowly, bringing his muzzle closer to the ground, close to Eli's feet. His tail, previously still, flicked slightly, a signal of engagement rather than agitation. His posture shifted, no longer tense but relaxed. The dog was no longer acting as a weapon, an enforcer, or a trained asset. He was simply present. Present with the child who had approached him without fear, who had spoken to him with innocence and kindness. Officer Hayes blinked repeatedly, unwilling to believe what was happening. He had worked with Rex for years, had trained him extensively, had witnessed him remain unwavering in tense encounters, but never like this. The dog's behavior defied explanation, defied training, and yet it was undeniably real. Hayes found himself holding his breath, his hands gripping the leash loosely because he trusted the connection forming before him more than he had ever trusted any command. Sarah, meanwhile, felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had come expecting a fun day with her son. She had not come expecting to witness a miracle. Yet here she was, frozen in place, overwhelmed by a mixture of fear, awe, and pride. Her tiny son had not just approached a dog trained for danger. He had elicited a response that no adult had ever managed, a response that made grown men and women in the square feel something they rarely allowed themselves to feel: wonder. Eli paused just a few feet from Rex and crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the dog's level without making sudden movements. He reached out a tentative hand, hovering near Rex's nose, and inhaled deeply, as if drawing courage from the dog itself. And in that single breath, the world seemed to pause. Then the impossible happened. Rex nudged the boy's extended hand gently with his nose, just once. A small, soft touch that carried the weight of trust, acceptance, and unspoken connection. The crowd gasped audibly, a collective sound of astonishment. Parents clutched their children, officers exchanged stunned glances, and someone behind them whispered, "Did that just happen?" Eli giggled softly, a sound of pure joy and relief. He had not been afraid. He had not screamed. He had not even hesitated. And the dog, the mighty K9, had responded to him as if recognizing a kindred spirit. It was a fleeting, perfect moment that none present would ever forget. Officer Hayes exhaled slowly, finally lowering his hand. "Good boy, Rex," he murmured, voice catching slightly. Even the handler, seasoned and composed, was moved. Rex's body relaxed completely, his muscles no longer tense. He sat there, alert but calm, allowing the boy to remain in front of him, to explore this connection on his own terms. The crowd erupted quietly, not in chaotic applause but in hushed appreciation. They had witnessed something rare, something impossible, and it had happened in the span of a single minute. Parents whispered to each other, some reaching for phones now, eager to capture the miracle. Others simply watched, knowing that no video could ever replicate the feeling of being there, in that square, witnessing a bond form between a child and a dog in real time. Eli stood there, chest rising and falling with steady breath, and looked up at the dog once more. "You're a good dog," he said again, this time with a smile. The simplicity of the words carried profound truth. And in response, Rex wagged his tail slightly, a subtle but unmistakable sign that this child had touched something deep within him. That morning in Maple Creek, something extraordinary had occurred. It was not a trick, not a stunt, and certainly not scripted. A 3-year-old had approached a highly trained police dog, a child whose understanding of fear and danger was far simpler than that of adults, and he had elicited a response that left everyone watching speechless. It was the kind of moment that would be told and retold, a story that would live in hearts for years. But even as the crowd gasped and whispered, the real magic was in the silent, wordless connection forming between a boy and a dog, one that would define the rest of the day, and the memories of everyone who had the privilege to witness it. And it was just the beginning. The Maple Creek Town Square had returned to a deceptive calm after the brief gasp from the crowd. Yet beneath the surface, the energy was palpable, electric. The demonstration, originally meant to be light-hearted entertainment, had transformed into something extraordinary, a story unfolding in real time that no one present would ever forget. Parents stood frozen, children stopped mid-step, and officers exchanged glances of disbelief. Cameras had begun to appear, phones lifted tentatively to capture what the world might later call the miracle in the square. Eli, small and unassuming, stood just a few feet from Rex, his wide eyes locked on the dog. He tilted his head slightly, studying the large German shepherd as though he were reading the pages of a book only he could understand. His tiny hand hovered near the dog's head, hesitant but resolute. The moment was delicate. One wrong move could shatter it. But Eli didn't know fear. He only knew curiosity, understanding, and a quiet sense that he was meant to be here, in this place, at this exact moment. Rex remained motionless, his enormous body tense yet relaxed, his tail flicking subtly in response to the child's movements. The years of training had prepared him to react instantly to threat, but this was no threat. Rex sensed it. He could feel it in the small heartbeat, in the child's steady breathing, and in the unmistakable aura of innocence that emanated from Eli. It was a language of trust and purity he had not encountered in the chaos of duty. Officer Hayes stood nearby, hands loosely on the leash, eyes wide with disbelief. He had trained Rex for thousands of scenarios, but nothing had prepared him for a toddler to approach with such courage, and to elicit a response from a dog conditioned for fearlessness, discipline, and strength. His heart raced, not from danger but from awe. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "Stay calm, Rex, stay calm." The crowd, sensing the gravity of the moment, had quieted completely. There were no whispers, no shifting of feet, only the collective holding of breath. People instinctively recognized that something miraculous was unfolding before them. Children pressed their faces against the safety barriers, eyes wide, while parents clutched hands or hugged smaller siblings close. The usual bustle of the community day had vanished, replaced by a serene tension that everyone felt in their chest. Eli extended his small hand toward Rex once more. He paused halfway, uncertain, then whispered softly, "It's okay, you're good." The simplicity of the words belied their power. In that instant, the connection between child and dog transcended training, experience, and expectation. Rex's head tilted slightly, ears flicking in subtle acknowledgement. The massive dog lowered himself a fraction closer to the ground, not as an act of submission, but as an expression of trust. Sarah, watching helplessly from a few steps behind, felt tears prick at her eyes. Her son was facing a creature many adults would hesitate to approach, yet he showed no fear. Instead, he radiated calm and compassion. The realization hit her. Eli wasn't simply brave. He had unlocked something within the dog, something deeper than obedience, something that no one had ever witnessed before. She whispered to herself, He's speaking to him without words." Rex's massive nose inched toward Eli's hand. The dog's muscles rippled under his sleek coat, but he remained gentle, almost reverent. The crowd gasped, collectively leaning forward. Even the officers, trained to maintain control over animals capable of extraordinary force, were frozen in awe. The sight of a child eliciting trust and tenderness from a K9 trained for danger was unprecedented. Eli giggled softly, the pure, unbridled laughter of a child who felt understood. He reached out again, this time brushing the dog's soft fur lightly, tentative but full of wonder. Rex responded instantly, nuzzling his nose against Eli's tiny palm, a movement so gentle that it seemed impossible given the dog's size and power. The crowd collectively inhaled, silent witnesses to a bond forming without pretense, without fear, without expectation, simply trust. Officer Hayes knelt slightly, careful not to interfere but unable to tear his eyes away. He had trained Rex for years, witnessed him face armed suspects, navigate dangerous environments and protect lives. Yet none of those moments carried the depth, the purity of this encounter. In that square, in front of dozens of onlookers, a child had done what years of training could not. He had revealed the heart of a dog, one layer beneath discipline, one layer beneath the badge. Eli continued to interact with Rex, slowly and carefully, moving around the dog as if performing a delicate dance. The dog followed his movements subtly with his eyes, occasionally flicking his tail, shifting his weight, but always maintaining a gentle, calm presence. It was a synchronization born not of commands or repetition, but of mutual recognition. In that moment, child and dog were equals in understanding, companions in a language older than words. Parents whispered to each other, tears in their eyes, many silently praying that nothing would disrupt the fragile connection. A few brave bystanders lifted their phones, capturing the moment for posterity. They knew it would not be the same if retold in photographs. It had to be witnessed live to feel the full weight of it. "Look at him," one officer murmured, voice barely audible. "I've never seen him do that before." "Me neither," another replied, shaking his head. "It's unreal." Eli suddenly paused, kneeling slightly to be at eye level with the dog. He whispered again, barely audible, "I like you, Rex." The dog's response was immediate. He pressed his enormous muzzle lightly against the child's chest, careful not to apply weight, a gesture of warmth and protection. It was a profound display of trust, a powerful working animal acknowledging the innocence of a child, responding not with force but with care. The crowd began to breathe again, quietly, in awe of what they were witnessing. The small, ordinary child had broken through the barrier of training and discipline, revealing the empathy and heart hidden within a being trained to face danger without hesitation. Sarah finally stepped forward slowly, her voice trembling. "Eli, sweetie, come back." The child looked up at her, then back at Rex. He hesitated, caught between instinct and obedience. He glanced at his mother, then nodded ever so slightly, signaling understanding, but not before one more gentle touch on the dog's head. Rex leaned in, pressing his head lightly against the child's hand, almost as if offering reassurance. In that single, fleeting moment, something shifted not only in the dog but in everyone present. Adults felt emotions they hadn't expected to feel. Children felt a quiet awe. Officers felt humbled. And somewhere deep in the back of the crowd, people instinctively understood that what they had witnessed was far more than a simple interaction. It was a profound lesson in trust, compassion, and the quiet power of innocence. And as Eli finally allowed himself to be guided back to his mother, the crowd erupted in applause, not loud or chaotic but reverent and heartfelt. Cheers mixed with tears, laughter mixed with gasps. No one spoke for a moment, for words seemed inadequate. Rex remained seated, watching the child retreat, tail flicking slowly in acknowledgement. He returned to his trained composure only partially, for something had changed deep inside him. The bond formed in that fleeting, magical minute would linger, unspoken but unmistakable, a memory that neither dog nor child would ever forget. In Maple Creek on that ordinary morning, the ordinary had become extraordinary. A 3-year-old had approached a police dog and in doing so revealed something remarkable, the ability to touch a heart, even one trained for discipline, authority, and danger. And for everyone present, life would never feel quite the same again. The moment was complete, but the story was far from over. The crowd remained silent, frozen in a mixture of awe and disbelief. What had started as a simple community demonstration had become something extraordinary, almost surreal. Parents pressed their hands to their mouths, some gasping, some smiling through tears. Children peeked over shoulders, wide-eyed, captivated by the bond forming between the tiny boy and the massive police dog. Officer Daniel Hayes tightened his grip on Rex's leash instinctively, even though he knew the dog was calm. Every muscle in his body remained alert, ready to act in case of sudden movement, but deep down, Hayes understood this was no ordinary situation. He had trained Rex for years, handling dangerous encounters, aggressive suspects, and unpredictable environments. Yet nothing could have prepared him for this. A 3-year-old eliciting a response from a dog trained to be disciplined, precise, and focused, a response that defied all expectations. Eli had paused mid-step just a few feet from Rex, his tiny hand hovering above the dog's head. His innocent words, "good dog," had cut through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a gesture learned from others. It was simply kindness. And in that moment, something inside Rex stirred, a part of him that no training, no obedience, no badge could ever touch. The massive German shepherd shifted slightly, just enough to draw a collective intake of breath from the crowd. His ears relaxed, no longer alert in the rigid, professional stance required for demonstrations. His tail flicked slowly, a subtle but unmistakable sign of engagement, signaling that he had recognized the child's intent. It was a reaction that officers and onlookers alike had never witnessed before. Hayes's jaw tightened as he tried to maintain composure. He whispered almost to himself, "Rex, stay calm." The dog did not move aggressively, nor did he rise as though preparing to attack. Instead, he leaned forward just slightly, lowering his massive head, bringing his muzzle closer to the ground. Every observer could see the transformation. A disciplined K9, trained to face danger without hesitation, now showing signs of trust, empathy, and recognition. Sarah, holding her breath behind her son, felt her chest tighten. Her tiny son was standing unafraid in front of a dog built for protection and enforcement, and yet Rex had responded not with force, but with gentleness. Her eyes blurred with tears. She could not comprehend how her 3-year-old had accomplished what countless adults could not, to reach the heart of a dog who had spent years learning only discipline and control. Eli, still focused on Rex, crouched slightly to be closer to the dog's level. His tiny hand hovered just inches above the dog's head, trembling ever so slightly with anticipation. "You're good," he whispered again, barely audible even to the closest observers. The words carried no fear, no hesitation, only sincerity. Then, with a movement so gentle it seemed impossible given his size and training, Rex nudged Eli's hand lightly with his nose. The soft contact was almost imperceptible to anyone not watching closely, but to those who were present, it was transformative. The dog was not merely tolerating the child, he was acknowledging him, responding to him with a subtle but undeniable display of connection. A collective gasp spread through the crowd, punctuated by muffled whispers and exclamations of disbelief. "Did you see that?" One parent asked another, voice trembling. "The dog, he's actually responding to him." Officer Hayes's mind raced. He had trained Rex to follow commands with precision, to protect, to detect threats, to obey instinctively. And yet here he was, a highly trained K9, showing signs of emotion and recognition outside of training. Hayes knew instinctively that this was more than a reaction. It was a moment of pure connection, a recognition between two living beings, unmediated by commands or reward. The child, unaware of the gravity of his actions, giggled softly. "See, you're a good dog," he said, brushing his hand lightly across Rex's head. The sound of his laughter, small and pure, seemed to amplify the effect. The massive dog leaned into the touch gently, as if absorbing every ounce of affection. The onlookers could hardly contain themselves. Cameras were raised, capturing the unfolding miracle, but nothing could truly replicate the emotional weight of the moment. The interaction was subtle, quiet, almost private, but everyone could feel it. Adults exchanged glances, many wiping tears from their eyes. Children whispered excitedly, pointing at the scene, unable to fully comprehend why it made them feel so moved. One of the other officers whispered to Hayes, voice shaky, "I've never seen him behave like that, not with anyone, not in training, not in arrests." Hayes nodded, swallowing hard. "Neither have I. This is different." The child took another step forward, slow and measured, placing both hands on the dog's shoulders with surprising confidence. Rex's head lowered slightly, pressing gently against the boy's tiny frame. It was a gesture of trust and acceptance, a demonstration of vulnerability that the dog had never shown in a public setting. Hayes's heart pounded. Years of experience had taught him to expect anything from working dogs, but this defied all rules. The crowd had become completely silent, collectively holding their breath as the interaction continued. Parents whispered explanations to their children, trying to rationalize what they saw. "Sometimes," one mother said, voice trembling, "a kind heart can reach places that no training can." Eli giggled again, brushing the dog's fur gently. "You like me, don't you?" he asked. The words were simple, yet they carried a resonance that no one could deny. Rex responded by nudging Eli once more with his nose, a subtle, deliberate gesture that communicated understanding. The crowd gasped again, some whispering prayers of awe and gratitude. Sarah finally moved forward slowly, her hands hovering near her son, unsure whether to intervene or allow the miracle to continue. She dared not speak, for fear that her voice might disrupt the fragile connection. Instead, she watched, her heart full, as her child and the dog continued their quiet, intimate exchange. Officer Hayes finally lowered his hand slightly, though his grip on the leash remained firm. He had seen countless situations in his career that required precise control and split-second decisions, but nothing had ever felt so profound. In that moment, he realized that Rex had become more than a police dog. He had become a living testament to the power of trust, innocence, and empathy. Eli took one final step back, smiling shyly. "Bye-bye, Rex," he whispered softly. The dog remained seated, head lowered, eyes tracking the boy's movement. He did not rise, did not bark, did not growl. He had been touched in a way that could never be erased by the simplicity and purity of a child's heart. The crowd erupted in a mixture of applause, laughter, and tears. Many were shaking their heads, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Some parents lifted their phones to replay the moment in slow motion, hopping to capture the nuance, the subtle gestures, the fleeting connection that words could never describe. Rex remained seated, head slightly lowered, tail flicking gently. He had returned partially to his professional stance, but there was a softness to his eyes that had never been seen before. Something fundamental had shifted within him, a recognition that would endure far longer than the morning demonstration. Sarah finally reached out to take Eli's hand, squeezing it gently. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. Eli looked back once at Rex, smiling, before allowing his mother to guide him away. The dog's eyes followed him until he disappeared from view, a silent guardian remembering a bond that had formed in less than a minute. And in that small Ohio town, the event that began as an ordinary police demonstration had transformed into a story that would be told for years. A story of innocence, trust, and the extraordinary ability of a child to touch the heart of a creature trained for discipline, danger, and strength. It was a moment no one would ever forget. The Maple Creek town square had settled into a quiet reverence, though the air remained charged with awe. What had unfolded in the last few minutes felt impossible, yet undeniable. A 3-year-old boy, small and innocent, had approached a fully trained police dog, and through nothing more than trust and pure-hearted words, had unlocked something deep within the K9. Officer Daniel Hayes stood beside Rex, still gripping the leash, though his hands had relaxed slightly. His heart raced not with fear but with wonder. He had trained Rex for thousands of scenarios, drug searches, suspect apprehensions, even life-threatening situations, but never anything like this. Nothing had prepared him for a child to elicit such a profound reaction from a dog trained for obedience and discipline. I've never seen anything like it," Hayes whispered under his breath, mostly to himself. Rex sat calmly beside him, the dog's massive frame radiating control and discipline, yet his eyes held a softness that Hayes had never observed before. It was as if the dog had experienced something profoundly transformative, and the bond that had formed in a single fleeting moment could not be undone. Sarah stood a few feet behind, tears streaking down her cheeks. She had known her son was special, but witnessing the courage and purity of his actions in front of Rex overwhelmed her. Eli, tiny and unassuming, had not only approached a creature built for power and protection. He had communicated with him in a language older than words, one of trust, compassion, and innocence. Eli's giggles echoed softly through the square as he moved closer to his mother, turning briefly to wave at Rex. "Bye-bye, Rex," he said, his voice filled with the simple sincerity only a child can convey. Rex's eyes followed the boy until he disappeared from view, a silent acknowledgement of their brief, yet profound, connection. Other parents whispered to each other in disbelief, trying to rationalize what they had seen. "I don't understand how that's possible," one mother said, voice shaking. "The dog, he obeyed, but it wasn't training. He responded to the child." An officer next to Hayes nodded, equally stunned. "It's like he recognized something in the boy, something deeper. We've trained dogs for years, but this is different." Rex's posture slowly returned to a more standard working position, though there remained a softness to his eyes, a quiet humility that contrasted with his usual commanding presence. Hayes knew immediately that this dog had been touched, not by commands, not by discipline, not by threat, but by something far more powerful, the unwavering kindness of a child. The crowd began to murmur, processing the incredible moment they had just witnessed. Some whispered prayers under their breath, others wiped tears from their eyes. A few children pressed their faces against the barriers, speaking softly to one another, mimicking Eli's bravery and awe. Everyone present seemed to feel the weight of the moment, even if they could not fully articulate it. Sarah reached for Eli, holding his small hand tightly. "You were very brave," she said, voice thick with emotion. Eli looked up at her, his eyes shining. "He's a good dog, Mommy," he replied. "I like him." "Yes, sweetie," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "And he likes you too." Officer Hayes knelt beside Rex, carefully examining the dog's response. He had never witnessed such a reaction in public, nor in training. In his years as a K-9 handler, he had learned to respect the emotional intelligence of working dogs, but what he saw in Rex now transcended anything he had experienced. The dog had recognized trust and reciprocated it in a tangible, undeniable way. Hayes's hands, though steady on the leash, trembled ever so slightly as he whispered, "Good boy, Rex. You're amazing." The crowd began to applaud softly, reverent yet emotional, their voices filled with wonder rather than ceremony. It was not loud or boisterous. It was measured, a collective acknowledgement of the extraordinary bond they had witnessed. Cameras flashed, capturing what many hoped to share with the world. Yet even the photographs could not truly capture the nuance, the subtle gestures, the invisible thread of understanding that connected child and dog in that fleeting moment. Eli's tiny frame hugged his mother, a quiet smile on his face. For him, it had been a simple act, an expression of curiosity and empathy. He had not known he was making history or inspiring awe or demonstrating courage beyond his years. He had only followed his instincts, guided by innocence and the belief that kindness could bridge worlds, even worlds separated by size, strength, and training. Officer Hayes finally spoke to the crowd, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Rex is trained for a lot of things," he said. "Danger, obedience, protection. But what he showed today, that can't be trained. That comes from the heart. And today we all saw it thanks to one very brave little boy." Parents whispered and nodded, many dabbing at their eyes. Children giggled softly, some mimicking Eli's gestures, reaching out their own hands toward their parents' pets or the imaginary animals in their imaginations. The lesson had reached everyone. Courage and compassion are not measured by size or strength, and sometimes the smallest among us have the power to awaken the greatest hearts. Sarah finally approached Officer Hayes, thanking him for letting Eli interact with Rex. "I didn't know he would," Do all that, she said, voice trembling. Hayes smiled softly. Neither did I, he admitted. But some things just can't be predicted. You should be proud. Your son reminded all of us why we do what we do, and reminded Rex, too, that there's more to life than rules and training. Rex shifted slightly, as if acknowledging Hayes's words. His tail wagged slowly, a subtle, deliberate motion, and his eyes swept over the square one more time, finally resting on Eli's retreating figure. It was a moment of quiet reflection, a dog processing the connection he had just experienced, a dog whose heart had been touched in a way that no one could have anticipated. The other officers exchanged quiet looks, some shaking their heads in disbelief. I've handled K-9 units for over a decade, one said quietly. I've seen dogs do amazing things, but what that kid did, it's not something you can train. That's instinct, empathy, heart. Even the mayor of Maple Creek, who had been observing from the sidelines, approached, shaking his head with a soft laugh. I don't know how to explain it, he admitted. All I know is, I just watched a 3-year-old change the world, or at least change the world for a dog and everyone who saw it. As Eli clutched his mother's hand and began moving toward the snack booths, he turned back one final time and waved at Rex. The dog's gaze followed him, steady and calm, and for a brief instant it felt as though the entire square had stopped to honor that silent bond. The connection, though simple, was profound. A reminder that trust, compassion, and courage can transcend training, expectation, and even fear. For the people of Maple Creek, the day would be remembered forever. Not for the balloons, the demonstrations, or the community games. Not for the hot dogs or the prize giveaways. No, they would remember it for one boy, one dog, and the invisible thread of understanding that had linked them together in a moment of pure magic. And in that quiet square, amidst the applause, whispers, and quiet awe, one truth had become clear. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is small. And sometimes it is a 3-year-old boy standing before a police dog, showing the world exactly what it means to trust and to love. By mid-afternoon, the Maple Creek town square had returned to the usual buzz of a community event. Laughter, music, and the scent of popcorn drifting through the air. Yet beneath the ordinary sights, the town was alive with something extraordinary. Word of what had happened earlier, the moment between Eli and Rex, was spreading fast. Phones buzzed, videos uploaded to social media, and the event that had begun as a local police demonstration was beginning to capture the attention of people far beyond the town's quiet streets. Sarah, still holding Eli's hand, had watched the footage shared by other parents. Their son's small gestures, his gentle words, and Rex's subtle responses had been captured perfectly by several phones. The videos, shared with hashtags like Eli and Rex and Police Dog Miracle, quickly garnered thousands of views. Comments poured in from strangers across the country. I can't believe this. That boy has a heart of gold. The dog's reaction is incredible. Each post was filled with awe, admiration, and for many, tears. Eli, unaware of the growing attention, was happily exploring the snack booths. He chattered with his mother about balloons and stickers, still too young to comprehend that his simple act of kindness had captured the hearts of thousands. He didn't understand the cameras, the social media shares, or the headlines that would soon describe him as a hero. All he knew was Rex, and the connection they had shared, however brief, that morning. Officer Daniel Hayes, however, was fully aware. The moment had unsettled him in the best way possible. He had witnessed countless interactions between humans and K-9 units, but he had never seen a bond like this, so instantaneous, so pure, so unexplainable. The videos circulating online confirmed what he had felt in person. Rex's response had been genuine, instinctive, and emotionally profound. Hayes had a sinking feeling that this story would travel far beyond Maple Creek. By evening, local news stations picked up the story. Reporters called the police department, eager to interview Officer Hayes and capture the miraculous interaction for broadcast. The footage from the town square played repeatedly, showing Eli standing fearlessly in front of Rex, his tiny hands extended, the dog responding with subtle nudges and calm attentiveness. The images were striking, capturing the bond that had formed in mere minutes. "I've never seen anything like this," Hayes told the reporters, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Rex is an incredible dog trained to handle danger and protect, but today, a 3-year-old boy reached him in a way no training ever could. It's something I'll never forget, and I'm certain Rex hasn't either." Sarah watched the interviews from home, still holding Eli on her lap as he played with a small stuffed animal. "Mommy, is Rex on TV?" he asked innocently. Sarah smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "Yes, sweetie. Everyone is seeing what a good boy you were today." Eli nodded seriously, as though approving the explanation, then went back to his toy, blissfully unaware of the national attention his actions were attracting. By the following morning, the story had gone viral. National news outlets shared clips of the event, framing it as a miracle encounter between a young child and a police dog. Social media exploded with comments, shares, and stories of children and pets connecting in similar ways. The hashtags Eli and Rex, Good Dog, and Miracle Moment were trending on multiple platforms. People from across the country shared their own experiences with animals, inspired by the simplicity and purity of the bond. Officer Hayes received countless messages from other K9 handlers, parents, and dog enthusiasts. Many praised both Rex and Eli, some asking how they could replicate such a connection with their own dogs. Hayes was humbled. He knew this wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about trust, innocence, and the reminder that the simplest gestures can have the greatest impact. In Maple Creek, the town embraced the newfound attention with pride. The mayor held a small ceremony at the police department, honoring Eli and Rex for their extraordinary connection. Local reporters covered the event, capturing the scene as families gathered, children laughed, and officers smiled proudly at their canine partner. Rex, calm and composed as ever, allowed Eli to approach him once again, this time under the watchful eyes of the crowd and cameras. The bond that had formed in private now became a symbol for everyone present. Eli, still shy but confident in his actions, reached out to Rex and whispered softly, "Good dog," just as he had before. Rex responded with the same gentle nudge, the same calm attentiveness, and the crowd erupted in applause. People cheered not just for the child or the dog or the demonstration, but for the purity of the connection, for the reminder that courage and kindness know no age, no size, and no boundaries. Back at home, Sarah reflected on what had happened. She had always encouraged Eli to be kind, to approach life with curiosity, and to treat animals with respect. She had never imagined that these simple lessons would resonate so deeply, not only with Rex but with a national audience. It was overwhelming, yes, but also profoundly moving. She hugged her son tightly, whispering, "You made a difference, sweetie. You really did." Eli smiled, tilting his head, as though understanding that somehow he had done something important. Across the country, people shared the story with friends, families, and colleagues. Animal shelters reported increased inquiries, parents encouraged children to spend time with their pets, and police departments received messages about the inspiring interaction. The story of Eli and Rex became a reminder of the profound bonds possible between humans and animals, and the incredible power of trust, empathy, and courage. Even in the police department, Hayes noticed a change. Officers remarked that Rex seemed more attentive, calmer, and yet somehow more connected to the humans around him. The dog's interactions were no longer solely dictated by training or commands. There was now an element of emotional intelligence, a responsiveness born from his encounter with Eli. It was subtle, but noticeable to anyone who had worked with him closely. Eli, unaware of the ripple effect he had created, continued his everyday life. He attended preschool, played with friends, and enjoyed ordinary childhood activities. Yet there was a quiet confidence in him, an awareness that small actions could have profound consequences. The bond he had formed with Rex remained strong, a memory of trust, connection, and bravery that would shape both their lives forever. In Maple Creek, Life gradually returned to normal, but the story lingered. Parents recounted it to their children. Officers reflected on it during training sessions. Even strangers who had only seen the viral videos shared it widely, inspired to consider the extraordinary power of kindness in everyday life. Eli's simple act had become more than a local story. It had become a symbol of hope, compassion, and the incredible bonds possible between humans and animals. And as the sun set over the quiet streets of Maple Creek, Eli sat on his front porch, hugging his small stuffed animal, unaware of the national admiration his courage had sparked. Rex rested nearby, alert but calm, his eyes occasionally glancing toward the boy who had, in a few simple gestures, touched something deep within him. The bond was unspoken, timeless, and unbreakable, a testament to the quiet power of innocence and the enduring magic of connection. Weeks passed since that remarkable morning in the Maple Creek town square, but for the small Ohio town, the story of Eli and Rex had not faded. In fact, it seemed to grow with every telling. Social media posts had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. News outlets had run follow-ups, interviews, and human interest segments about the extraordinary interaction. For many, it was a story of miracles, courage, and the quiet power of empathy. Eli, however, remained blissfully unaware of the national attention. For him, Rex had always been more than just a police dog. He was a friend, a companion, a gentle giant who had responded to the simplest expression of kindness. Even now, at 3 years old, he remembered the soft nudge, the calm gaze, and the subtle gestures of trust that had made the morning so unforgettable. Sarah watched her son play in their backyard, a small smile tugging at her lips. He ran around with a little ball, tossing it into the air and giggling when it bounced unpredictably. She noticed the quiet confidence in him, the ease with which he approached life's small challenges. It was subtle, but she knew it had been shaped in part by that extraordinary day, the day her son had shown courage, compassion, and empathy in front of an entire town. Officer Daniel Hayes and Rex had also returned to their routines, though neither would ever be the same. Hayes noticed subtle differences in Rex, a softer gaze toward children, a gentle nudge when people reached out, and an uncanny ability to sense moods in ways that went beyond training. It was as if the bond with Eli had opened a new dimension of understanding in the dog, one that would forever alter how he interacted with the humans around him. One quiet morning, Hayes decided to revisit the town square with Rex. The streets were empty, the sun warm on the pavement. As they approached the spot where the demonstration had taken place, Rex paused. His ears twitched, his nose lifted slightly, and his body remained still. Hayes knew immediately that the dog remembered, vividly, every detail of the encounter, every gesture, every whisper of kindness. "That's right, boy," Hayes murmured softly, patting Rex's head. "You remember." Rex wagged his tail gently, his massive body relaxed yet alert. It was a subtle acknowledgement, but Hayes could feel it. There was no doubt. Rex remembered Eli, remembered the trust, the courage, and the pure-hearted bravery of a small child who had approached him without fear. Meanwhile, the town of Maple Creek had begun to embrace the story in ways beyond social media. The mayor organized a small community event in honor of Eli and Rex, celebrating the extraordinary bond they had formed. Banners decorated the town square, reading, "Courage comes in small packages, and kindness can touch every heart." Families gathered, children clutched balloons, and local media documented the celebration. Eli attended with his mother, shy but excited. His eyes immediately found Rex among the uniformed officers. The dog's ears perked up, tail flicking in recognition. The moment they saw each other, something unspoken passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed, enduring far beyond the public spectacle. As the ceremony began, Officer Hayes spoke to the crowd. "We've trained Rex for many things," he said. "Protection, obedience, detection. But today we honor a lesson that cannot be trained, the lesson Eli taught us all. Courage, empathy, and kindness can reach places no training ever could. Today, we celebrate that bond and the reminder that the smallest among us can have the biggest hearts." Applause rang out, warm and heartfelt. Eli clutched his mother's hand, beaming. He didn't fully understand the words, but he understood the warmth, the love, and the admiration of everyone around him. Rex, calm and attentive, allowed the boy to approach once again. Eli whispered softly, "Good dog," and Rex responded with a gentle nudge of his nose, the same trust and affection displayed weeks before. The story continued to ripple beyond Maple Creek. Schools across the region used the story to teach lessons about empathy, kindness, and courage. Local shelters shared videos, encouraging children and families to bond with animals gently and patiently. Police departments nationwide referenced the moment as a lesson in the humanity that can exist within law enforcement animals and the people who care for them. Sarah reflected on the impact as she watched Eli laugh and run around with Rex at the ceremony. She felt pride, awe, and gratitude, realizing that the day had not just changed a dog, it had changed her son, her family, and an entire community. She thought about the countless children who might be inspired to act with courage and kindness because of her son's simple gestures. Officer Hayes, watching from nearby, allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He had spent years training Rex for control, precision, and duty. But he had learned a new lesson. Sometimes, the heart teaches more than any manual, any command, any training ever could. In a world obsessed with rules and protocols, a 3-year-old boy had reminded him, and everyone watching, that compassion and trust are far more powerful than any leash or badge. Rex, now fully calm, lay down beside Eli. The boy leaned over, hugging the massive dog gently around the neck. It was a quiet, intimate moment witnessed by the small crowd, one that symbolized everything remarkable about their story: innocence meeting experience, courage meeting trust, and a bond that transcended words. As the sun set over Maple Creek, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the town reflected on the extraordinary day. What had started as a local demonstration had become a story of hope, inspiration, and humanity. In living rooms, schools, and offices across the country, people were reminded that courage does not always roar, that bravery does not always look like strength, and that sometimes the smallest among us can touch the hearts of the strongest. Eli, exhausted but joyful, yawned in his mother's arms. "Bye, Rex," he whispered softly. Rex's head lifted slightly, nose brushing gently against the boy's tiny hand, a final acknowledgement of their shared experience, a promise that their bond would last far longer than the fleeting public moment. Sarah smiled down at her son, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. "You did something incredible today, Eli," she whispered, "and not just for Rex but for all of us." The boy nodded sleepily, unaware of the lives he had touched. To him, it had been simple, kindness, trust, and a good dog, yet in that simplicity lay extraordinary truth. Officer Hayes knelt beside Rex one last time before leaving the town square. "You've done well, boy," he said softly, stroking the dog's head. Rex's tail flicked slowly, a subtle, calm gesture of understanding. He had learned, experienced, and been changed in ways no one could have anticipated. And the connection with Eli, the boy who had dared to approach him without fear, would remain in his memory forever. Maple Creek slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the story of Eli and Rex endured. Families shared it with neighbors. Schools recounted it as an example of courage and empathy. Children everywhere were inspired to approach life with kindness, just as Eli had. And for Eli and Rex, their bond became more than a story. It became a lifelong friendship, one built on trust, innocence, and the quiet power of a small heart touching a great one. In the end, it wasn't just a story about a boy and a dog. It was a story about the extraordinary power of compassion, the unspoken connections that shape lives, and the reminder that sometimes the simplest gestures can leave the deepest impact. And so, in the heart of Maple Creek, under the golden light of a fatting sun, a small boy and a police dog sat together, silent but connected, reminding the world that courage, kindness, and empathy are gifts that never fade. The end.